Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls. Welcome into another YouTube live show tonight. I am John Kurtz. We're going to be talking a lot of talent acquisition, because the Big 12 just continues to bring in more and more high end, high level talent that the league needs to compete at the highest level of the sport. And it is BYU to do the latest as they land their 5-star quarterback that I talked about on Sunday. Ryder Lyons chooses BYU over Oregon, and he does it on the Pat McAfee show. So in style, this means a lot, not just for BYU, not just for BYU football, but BYU athletics as a whole, the Big 12 as a whole, because it continues a general trend. Yes, I am going to talk Houston football as well. Bennett, I believe it was, who, fair enough, called me out a little bit on that front at the end of last show. Good trend line for the Big 12 right now. All of this happening, by the way, on the same week that Shahan Jayaraja from CBS Sports wrote an excellent piece about Cody Campbell, Joey McGuire, Texas Tech, and everything that's happening in Lubbock. It was a boots on the ground story where he spent a lot of time there, and it was excellent stuff. So the Big 12 is getting a lot of attention right now for talent acquisition, which is great. There is a harsh reality to that, but there is also a lot of really encouraging positive that is coming from it. We're going to talk about it all. Plus, we're going to get to your hot takes as well. I asked on Twitter at JL Kurtz for your biggest, hottest Big 12 hot take for the upcoming football season. And we got some good ones, especially one of these about coaches in the Big 12 that I'm going to read. I really enjoyed it. So please hit me up with those, by the way, at JL Kurtz. Or if you want to try and get in your Big 12 hot take before the end of the show, you can do so in the regular chat, but I may not see it. So if you want to guarantee that it makes it on tonight, you can click the $sign below the chat box to submit a super chat, and then your Big 12 hot take for the upcoming season will be there, and I'll read it. I'll read it and react to it. Please do like the video. That is totally free. And if you could subscribe to the channel, that is just one click, totally free as well. Appreciate everybody who does that. Make sure you're signed up for the Open for Business Big 12 newsletter, ofbnews.com, in order to sign up for that, or click the link in the description of this video. Pretty easy to do that. We are barreling toward 4,500 subscribers to the Open for Business Big 12 newsletter, rather 4,600 to the Open for Business Big 12 newsletter. So make sure you get on that as well. Free to your inbox twice a week. Break down big stories for the Big 12 in college football, rather, and how they relate to the Big 12. So you don't have to read it through an SEC or a Big 10 lens. Let's see. Oh, yes. And of course, we're going to start today with Venmo, because the Venmo was hopping this week. And if you want to submit a question or comment that way, if you're not able to watch this show live, I will kick off the next show with your comment on Venmo or your question. It's just John-Kurtz-4. That is John-Kurtz-4 on Venmo in order to do that. So with that, we start with my guy, Jeffrey. Jeffrey, thank you so much. Jeffrey, very generous contribution, and says, love your program. Go Cougars. So BYU fans, hot and heavy right now with all the attention that the Cougs are getting, and rightfully so, with their talent acquisition. So thank you, Jeffrey. Genuinely do appreciate that, my friend. And then John. What's up, John? Appreciate you, John. Thank you for being here. John is going to start with a comment about Ryder Lyons, who says, why does 5-star quarterback Ryder Lyons, recruited by Oregon, get downgraded by ESPN to a 4-star when he chooses BYU? Well, so this is where, so I saw this and I was trying to look earlier. I was like, did he get downgraded? He is a 5-star recruit according to, let's see how many have him. On3 will tell us the answer there. If he did get downgraded, like, it would not be the first time that happened, right? I mean, that's something that's happened to many a school that is not in the Big Ten or the SEC, and sometimes that is the general opinion, the general consensus, like, hey, if they are going to whatever school, K-State, Texas Tech, BYU, they can't be as good as if they were going to Oregon or Ohio State or something like that. I don't know that I saw that ESPN directly downgraded him when he committed. He is 4-star on ESPN, so he's actually slightly lower rated on 3, where he is also a 4-star quarterback and the number 53 player in the country, whereas ESPN has him at number 49. 24/7 has him as a 5-star prospect. Rivals has him as a 5-star prospect. Rivals has Ryder Lyons as the number 3 player in the country, 24/7 number 13 player in the country, and then the other two 49 and 53. So there is some variance, which is pretty common. You will definitely see that. So, John, I will put it this way. I don't know for sure, and maybe you do, but I don't know for sure if that happened just because he committed. I know there are a lot of conspiracies out there about like, hey, if it feels like he's closing in on a commit to a non-SEC or Big Ten school, maybe a guy gets bumped a little bit in the recruiting rankings. It would not be the first time that it's happened. It's definitely frustrating. It's definitely a perception issue. And this is why you need to start acquiring more high-end talent like this, sending more people to the draft that can help change some of that narrative. But it's obviously not totally fair. I don't know if it directly happened in this case. And I certainly wouldn't stress it too much from ESPN because no offense to the worldwide leader and Big 12 TV partner, ESPN. But when it comes to the recruiting game, like the recruiting services, on ESPN is an afterthought to me. And Rivals has kind of become that way too, and they're being absorbed now by On3. So you're only going to have the three main recruiting services. But On3 and 24/7 are certainly the two that I put the most stock in these days, for what it's worth. And as I said, On3 actually had him as slightly lower rated there. But you get a lot of that. I'm about to talk about all these Big 12 teams pulling in five-star recruits later. I will cite an example from last year, K-State getting basically the first five-star high school recruit in history in Lincoln Cure, but he was not a consensus five-star across the board. So you'll just see that. You'll see that. And yeah, I heard K-State fans saying, well, hey, Oregon actually was the other primary contender for Lincoln Cure. Hey, if he had gone to Oregon, would he have gotten the bump on other sites? Potentially, maybe. It certainly wouldn't have hurt. So it is kind of just a tough reality, John. But I appreciate you. All that matters is that he goes and balls out for BYU. All that matters is that he goes and balls out for the Cougars and in the Big 12, which it will be a couple of years. He's not going to be here until 2027. Rise and Shout, real quick. Thank you, Rise and Shout. Igor Demon, number 8 pick to Brooklyn. Okay, yeah, I was not paying any attention at all to the NBA draft, to be quite honest, tonight, but I'm glad that you did. Rise and Shout. Igor Demon, congrats. I really enjoyed watching him play. I actually remember very early, where was I flying back from? I was flying back from Colorado. Yeah, it was in like October. Colorado, I had flown out for like a day, and I was coming back, and I watched a random BYU non-conference basketball game when I was just waiting in an airport, and that was the first time I saw Igor Demon, and I was like, damn, this kid can play, man. So anyway, random memory there. But Igor Demon is a part of the big narrative here for BYU. And, let's start with that. We'll start with the BYU piece of this before we get to the broader big picture for the Big 12, which is really what I want to spend the most time talking about tonight. But it makes a little bit more sense, I think, to go micro before you go macro here. So BYU got its guy, 5-star quarterback, Ryder Lyons. To some, the best quarterback in the country. One analyst at 24/7 has said that. As I mentioned, Rivals has him as high as the number 3 player in the country. So there are some recruiting services that think he is about as good as it gets. And now that BYU is showing the capability to land 5-star recruits in football and basketball, how concerned should everybody be about a sleeping giant awakening in the Big 12? I've got to say, I think the Big 12 should be pretty concerned. If you're worried about like winning titles, competing against them. Now, if you're worried about the conference profile, this can be a good thing. But BYU's got real sleeping giant potential here that could have been woken up. And it's really for one simple reason, one simple thing. Everything that I'm about to say can kind of be boiled down to one real thesis. And that is that it appears that going to BYU is now cool. Seems like going to BYU is now a cool thing to do. And I do not think that has been the case. In fact, I don't remember if it was Dick Harmon or who specifically it was in the Deseret News that I was reading today, that said, like, that has not been the case for a little while here. And there's a lot of power in that when you have the LDS connection, because there are a lot of LDS athletes across the country that you have an extra in with, right? Being that is the school of their religion. But if it's not like a cool place to go and the reputation is, hey, it's just all these like 2- and 3-star guys locally that get coached up, that's not as cool, as sexy of an option if you are a 5-star quarterback with all the options. But BYU has been able to turn the tide slowly but steadily with that now in both sports. So I think that's the real significance here. Part of this too is that, I mean, look, I mentioned it. Ryder Lyons announced his commitment on the Pat McAfee show. AJ DeBonsta announced his commitment to BYU with Stephen A. Smith, right, from ESPN. I was trying to, was that actually on an ESPN show? I think it was. That was First Take, right? That wasn't like Stephen A.'s podcast. Either way, huge platforms, like big platforms that a lot of people are watching, and that really sends a message. I mean, that's very smart marketing there. Hey, if we're going to land this kid, make sure that the whole world gets to see it. Make sure that as many people as possible know this. And so it starts to turn some heads like, oh, hey, man, BYU, what's going on at BYU? I'm seeing them land a kid. Every time I turn on ESPN, they're landing some 5-star high school kid. That is very helpful. That is free marketing for your program. Pat McAfee show is wildly popular. That's why he is paid an outrageous amount of money by ESPN. That's going to generate some juice for you here. And as I said, a lot of this is, to me, it is so much more about the big picture. I've had, I know like we had Bennett saying, hey, Houston has a 5-star quarterback too. Other, I'll get Utah fans in the comments just kind of rolling their eyes at this, like, oh, what's the big deal? And 5 stars have flamed out at BYU before. I'm not even so concerned about Ryder Lyons specifically. It's going to be at least 2 seasons before we see him play, because he's going to go on his LDS mission starting in January. And so you won't see him until 2027. And then at that point, like, is he the starting quarterback? Is he ready to just walk in and start? I mean, it's possible that it's like 2028 by the time that Ryder Lyons is really playing in earnest for BYU. So again, why, I'll play devil's advocate to myself, like, why get so hyped up about this right now? It's because of the general trend that we're seeing unfold here, and some extra dominoes that could fall for BYU's recruiting class because of this. And, like, immediate payoffs, it's what everybody wants. Like, in some ways, this is really very much the anti-society in 2025 commitment, because this will take a long time before you reap the real rewards in terms of Lions actually playing quarterback for BYU. But there are, I think, still some shorter-term rewards that can come into play here. And some of that is within this recruiting class. So BYU has already taken commitments from a couple of 4-stars in Brock Harris, who's a tight end. There's Bot Molitalo. Knew I was going to screw that up. 4-star offensive lineman. Both of those guys are top 200 recruits. Brock Harris is a top 100 national recruit. And now you've got a couple other recruits that have been waiting on this decision to see what was going to happen. Knew that would take up a lot of the spotlight. And so, for instance, BYU's going toe-to-toe with USC for a receiver. They're going head-to-head with Oregon and Michigan for another offensive lineman. And, like, this is a force multiplier. Like, Ryder Lyons is a force multiplier in a recruiting class. This is somebody that creates a lot of momentum and gets other young players to be like, well, damn, if they just got the 5-star quarterback, like, to be the gem of the class, I want to be there too. I want to go play with that guy. Like, why would I not sign up for this now? That is immensely helpful. Immensely helpful. And it just seems like BYU's done such a good job now of kind of modernizing its culture. I think the biggest advantage, or one of the biggest advantages that BYU has probably always had, is the general culture there. And certainly, like, with Kalani Sitake, he is such a, to me, culture guy. Like, that he's not scream, yell, lose it. He's not sleek, ultra savvy recruiter guy like Dan Lanning or something like that. It's culture is the selling point, but it's not like a boring, sleepy culture, which, to be honest, and don't take offense to this, BYU fans, but that was kind of my perception of BYU a few years ago. And I think that has totally changed. And some of that has been evolving into the NIL era and embracing the resources that BYU has. And this is part of why I call it a sleeping giant. Like, guys, BYU has a lot of very successful, very famous, and very wealthy grads. That is a fact. I mean, whether or not you want to dispute what BYU can or can't do, make fun of them, you cannot dispute that fact. And so if they can tap into that, use it to the best of their abilities, and, like, I don't know, I sensed like almost a little bit of shame for a little while there with some of the debate I was seeing about NIL, particularly around the Rob Wright situation. I don't know if you just remove some of the shame and accept like, hey, this is a part of college athletics now. That's a huge, huge thing. That is a huge thing if BYU is going to fully wield that power. And I found this little nugget from one of the stories in the Deseret News to be very encouraging along those lines. BYU has a new athletic director right now, and Brian Santiago, who is replacing a legend in Tom Holmoe. And here was a paragraph about Santiago. It said, Santiago has brought a competitive, quote, "we are not losing" attitude to his new regime, demanding no effort be small and no stone be unturned in order to succeed. I love that. That's what you need. That's what you need. And that is what BYU is seemingly like. I didn't need to read that to know that that's how the tide is really turning, but that's some good confirmation about kind of everything I've been describing to you before this. And then there was even this. This was another piece of the article. It talked about Ryder Lyon's brother, Walker, who's now at USC. He was being recruited 3 years ago by BYU. BYU did not land him. And the article quotes says the experience presented to the younger brother was completely different, according to those familiar with both athletes. Quote, BYU absolutely nailed the weekend. This was his visit over last weekend. BYU absolutely nailed the weekend, said a family member. They knocked it out of the park. It came down to BYU's culture and what the school is all about and the feeling he had while there. And there was also some reporting in this article that suggested it was like 80% Oregon a week ago and that the tide turned that quickly. So BYU had to do a lot of work here to get this ship turned around, and they did. They sure did in landing Ryder Lyons. This isn't just happening with football. I mean, I'm blending football and men's basketball here. They're both obviously the most visible sports at BYU. But we were just talking about Igor Demin, right? I mean, he just went number 8 in the draft. Okay, he's a lottery pick. AJ DeBonsta went on the Stephen A. Smith show, or went on with Stephen A. Smith, First Take, whatever it was, and chooses BYU, number 1 recruit nationally, making huge waves with that on the heels of a really fun BYU basketball team that went to the second weekend. They pulled Rob Wright away from Baylor, which definitely took some resources, but also took some selling the culture and what is building with Kevin Young in the basketball program right now, which is something that looks really awesome. So it's becoming cool to go to BYU, like across the board. I think your head is in the sand if you're going to try and deny that shift right now that we are seeing here. And the caution for Big 12 fans that are going to have to compete against BYU now is that, look, man, this is a sleeping giant with lots of rich and successful grads, a global and national fan base that you can tap into. And I said the LDS piece of this, like just very talented LDS athletes across the country now. Not only do you already have a bit of an in, but if you become a cool place with a bit of an in, now you're really talking about a recruiting advantage that you can flex. And then you combine that with, hey, we've got the resources to compete at the highest level. Now we will see how that's going to go with this new era of revenue sharing and supposedly a rev share cap and how well that's, you guys know, you probably are sick of hearing me talk about all that. We don't know exactly how all that's going to break down, but certainly whatever you can pay, BYU is going to be at the top end of that in finding ways to do that. And just as a school, as a school, BYU is going to have the resources to devote to, whether it's facilities, just on campus, like game day operations. I mean, the resources there are incredible. I can remember having a conversation with somebody around when I was at the K-State BYU football game this past year, and I made a comment to someone in the athletic department like, hey, like it's just the in-game experience at BYU is just really well done. There's so much stuff going on there. And it was relayed to me that BYU spends like 7 figures per game on just in-game experience stuff, which is incredible, but they have the resources to do it. And things like that can really help. If everybody is having to, Jamie Pollard's talking about, we got to find some way to get $20 million every year. All the money is going to be going to the athletes. Facilities, experience, stuff like that can fall by the wayside if you're not a school like a BYU that has it to devote to that. So anyway, I just think that there's a lot happening here that's very positive. And I think one thing not to overlook in all this, speaking of just the Big 12 in general, is how much it helps that BYU is now in the Big 12. When you're independent, you don't have that extra juice, you don't have the extra push to be competing like for a conference title. It's just hard to remain, I think, as competitive in that sort of environment because you're not getting an extra push. Look what happened. BYU joined the Big 12 and immediately had a tough season, took some lumps. And it was, I think, a bit of a wake-up call. Like, hey, if you're going to compete at this level and you want to compete for a playoff spot and winning a conference championship, you need to pick it up. And that was a kick in the butt that the program and the university, the athletic department, probably needed. And now it's here. So it started with that. Start embracing NIL, see some success, capitalize on the success. And there's just a ton of momentum going right now in both football and men's basketball at BYU. So congrats again to the Cougars for landing Rider Lions. And it continues, really nice trend across the whole of the Big 12. So like the video, please do subscribe to the channel. Appreciate all of you guys who do that. It is totally free to do that. If you'd like to submit a question or comment that you want to guarantee gets on the show tonight, click the $ below the chat box to submit a super chat. Appreciate everybody who does that. You can also hit me up on Venmo at John-Kurtz-4 if you're not watching live, and I will start the next show with your question or comment if you leave it there. Let's see. Let's check how many people are here. All right. A little more on the Twitter side tonight. Appreciate all of you who are there. Subscribe to the Open for Business Big 12 newsletter as well at ofbnews.com. Join 4,500 people who have subscribed to the Open for Business Big 12 newsletter. Okay, so BYU lands Rider Lions, but they are not the only Big 12 school that is upping its recruiting game right now. The Big 12, which has been a league that's just much maligned for not having enough talent, now has multiple teams making a huge splash in the recruiting and talent acquisition game. So will it be enough to legitimately change the perception of the league? Will national pundits, will the SEC, will the Big Ten, will people shut up about the Big 12 having a talent problem? Are we on that path? I think it's something worth exploring here, and that's what we're going to do. So Bennett, let's go back to Bennett. At the end of the show on Sunday, he sent me a super chat, and thank you again, Bennett, that was like, hey, man, you're talking about Rider Lions here and BYU this, BYU that. What about Houston? We've got Keyshawn Henderson, who is a 5-star quarterback commit, have not devoted this much time to him. Now, a part of this is, again, I think there's a bigger trend going on at BYU, a bigger shift that is happening. They are a bigger brand for the Big 12 right now. But Houston deserves some legitimate airtime for this. So I'm going to give it to him. And I talked a little bit. I know about Keyshawn Henderson in large part because Michael Bishop, K-State legend, is his coach, his high school coach. And there's a connection there. Willie Fritz at Houston coached Michael Bishop in junior college at Blinn JUCO. And so that helped. Houston lands a 5-star quarterback in Keyshawn Henderson, a guy that a lot of people at first wanted to play a different position, which is very similar to Michael Bishop, how K-State ended up with Michael Bishop. And he was runner-up for the Heisman in 1998 as a quarterback. Keyshawn Henderson, not everybody wanted him to play QB. Willie Fritz believed in him. Obviously, he has seen how that worked out with Bishop way back in his career earlier. And now Houston has a huge, huge piece of their recruiting class. I mean, another guy who many feel like is a top 3 quarterback in the country. Both incredible recruits and both absolutely huge. Absolutely huge that they have been landed. And for Willie Fritz, he's not a guy that you think of as talent acquisition guy. He's very much in the mold of what a lot of these Big 12 coaches kind of are, which is developers, developmental program guys. Chris Kleiman, Matt Campbell. We're talking about Kalani Sitake right there, right? These are guys that are typical. Kyle Whittingham, they're not out there landing 5-star recruits. They're developing the 3-star recruits into very, very productive college players. That's what you think of Willie Fritz as. If you're going to start giving Willie Fritz 5-star quarterbacks, I mean, who knows? Who knows what can happen there? And same with Kalani Sitake. Willie Fritz beat out, Florida State, Texas, Oregon, Michigan, take your pick. All of them wanted Keyshawn Henderson. Henderson was thinking about taking a visit to Florida State in the middle of spring, but he shut that down and said in early June his recruitment is shut down and he'll be coming to Houston. So It's massive. Number 2 player in Texas, number 16 player overall, number 4 quarterback according to the On3 industry consensus. It is a huge get. It is a huge, huge get for Houston and company, and they deserve a lot of credit, and they definitely deserve this airtime that Bennett requested. Okay. Then you've got BYU landing a 5-star quarterback. Like, these are both places that do not land 5-star talent typically. Okay. BYU had not landed a 5-star player in 22 years. This, according to the Deseret News, it had been 22 years since BYU had landed a 5-star prospect. It's a team that could not even get enough respect last year with a 10-2 season to be in the top 16 of the college football playoff rankings. They're out here landing a 5-star quarterback. Houston, not only, I mean, if we're talking about Houston, this kind of underscores the point to me of what's happening in the Big 12. Like, BYU hadn't done this in 22 years. Houston is not one of the schools at all that is believed to have top resources in the Big 12. This is not a place that is spending money like crazy. I mean, Dana Holgorsen, how long ago was it? A year or two ago, Dana Holgorsen in a press conference was basically just like, I guess 2 or 3 years ago, like, hey guys, like we need resources. We need to keep up. He was kind of publicly calling out the university for that. Like, these are not places where this just happens, where it just rolls in, and they're finding a way to step up and do this. The other thing, at Texas Tech, number 1 portal class in the country. I know some out there will say number 2. It depends on where you look. This is Big 12 country, so we're going to call it the number 1 portal class in the country. Texas Tech has not had a double-digit win season since George W. Bush was in office. Sorry, Tech fans. That's a huge thing that a school like that is now able to produce a number 1 portal class, which, you know, I mean, to me, for my money, it's like that feels almost more impressive or more competitive than just a high school recruiting class, right? Because there's so much fierce competition there for the immediate impact guys that are happening in the portal. K-State, if you want to extrapolate this out to another school, K-State landed a 5-star recruit for the first time in school history, directly out of high school anyway, last year with tight end Lincoln Cure. 5-star by at least 1 service, okay? That's in the 2025 class. He's on campus now. You're going to see him out on the field on Saturdays with Avery Johnson this year. That's a place, again, like that just doesn't really happen. You know, Bill Snyder 1.0, if you go back to the late 90s when Michael Bishop was there, yeah, those teams had a hell of a lot of talent. They were rolling out a ton of talent. Kind of a different recruiting game at that point. Since, you know, the mid to late 2000s, K-State is not a place where talent like that is typically acquired. So there's been this shift for all these different unlikely Big 12 places where they are stepping up their game at a time when the Big 12 desperately needs that. And you can say, hey, well, you know, BYU just got the kid because he is Mormon, or Houston just got Keyshawn Henderson because there's the Michael Bishop connection with Willie Fritz, or Tech just got the portal class because of all this money. They have this oil billionaire. Or K-State only got Lincoln Cure because he was an in-state kid, right? He's from the state of Kansas. My response would be, who cares? That's recruiting. That's how this works. It's not like there wasn't a lot of competition for all these schools to still have to beat out. Like I said, Oregon, in 2 of these cases, wanted the prospects badly. Lincoln Cure and Rider Lions. Florida State was just working on 2 months ago, still getting Keyshawn Henderson to visit. Didn't matter. Still locked him down. I mean, Texas Tech competed with literally every blue blood in the country multiple times in that portal class, multiple times over, more than they thought, to get all those kids. And yeah, you can have money. That does not guarantee you're going to land everybody. Rider Lions, by the way, turned down a more lucrative offer from Oregon to go to BYU. For instance. So these schools are leveraging their advantages. That's what recruiting is. I hate it when I see like those people complaining about any of these recruits that have been acquired and the talent that's been acquired here and saying, well, you know, it only happened because of this. Well, I mean, that's recruiting. Okay. You could go back to every recruit Nick Saban pulled in. Well, it only happened because Nick Saban is, you know, Nick Saban, or it only happened because, you know, Texas has this huge brand. Well, yeah, like that's how it works. So you use the advantages that you have. And it's huge that this is starting to happen now in big, high-profile spots. It's exactly what Brett Yormark is doing right now, which is betting on the league, betting on himself. Remember, this whole discussion, what have we been talking about for the better part of like 2 months at this point on the show? It's the battle over the playoff format, which Brett Yormark planted his flag on the 5+11, which is 11 at-larges. Instead of getting 2 auto bids for the Big 12, he said, we'll take our chances with the at-larges for a number of reasons. But one, he did not want to put this like ceiling on the Big 12 of only being half of the Big 10 or the SEC. That's a bet on yourself type of move. Okay. That is a turning back to the conference and being like, hey, we've all got to be better. We've all got to step our game up. And he's got to love that the response now is, hey, here's 2 5-star quarterbacks in the 2026 high school class. Right on the heels of you doing that, here's a couple of 5-star quarterbacks. K-State got a 5-star last year. Texas Tech is going all in to pull in a number 1 portal class and trying to, even if the unlimited money spigot thing is going to be shut off because they will actually enforce fair market value after this year, if Tech has a bunch of success this year, then it becomes much more of a destination and you can leverage the success you had this year to be successful in whatever recruiting is going to look like moving forward after that. So this is exactly what the commish has to want. It's when Brett Yormark sets this tone of like, hey, everybody needs to step it up. We can be better than this. You want to see teams follow through, and you're seeing teams follow through. Now, the true test is always going to be winning playoff games. Can you win playoff games against the SEC and the Big Ten? No doubt these will have to turn into wins for it to truly be revolutionary, but I don't know, man. It really helps. I will say this. It helps to get at-large bids if the perception is you're really talented. Texas Tech this year would stand a much better chance of landing an at-large bid than BYU did last year because the perception going in is, well, they must have a lot of talent because they out-recruited everybody in the portal and they had the number 1 portal class. So that's got to be a very talented roster. That's going to get you more benefit of the doubt. As for BYU last year, I mean, it just still had this reputation of like, well, look at this quarterback. He's kind of like this scrappy dude. Yeah, they're tough and physical, but it's not an overly talented team. How good could they actually be? Meanwhile, Miami has an objectively worse resume, but they've got Cam Ward, who was the most coveted quarterback in the portal, and everybody's slobbering all over. And they have a lot of talent that Mario Cristobal pulls in. Nobody had any doubt about that. And so Miami gets the benefit of the doubt, even though they were a worse team with a worse resume. So no guarantees. You've still got to cash this in. There is still another huge problem that I'm going to get to in just a moment when it comes to the Big 12 and talent. But a lot of positive things are happening here right at the exact moment that Brett Yormark is saying, we've got to bet on ourselves, guys. And BYU is helping to lead the charge on some of that. Okay, we've got some super chats to get to. We'll start with Caleb. What's up, Caleb? All right, Caleb says this is a message at the top. What is this quote, Caleb? What am I missing here? This is a message at the top. Also, what do you think of West Virginia and their old new coach and how this coming season will be? Well, it's funny. I was on a Sons of UCF show the other day, and which shout out to those guys. They do an awesome job. And I got asked, I felt bad because I got asked, like, who's going to have the better year, Scott Frost or Rich Rod, the 2 guys that have been hired back at their old schools. And I was like, well, I mean, I hate to say it, guys, but Scott Frost, we just don't have a track record, man. It was one great year, one so-so year, and then a lot of really bad with him as a head coach. So I don't have as much faith as I do in Rich Rod, who I've seen do this at multiple different stops and be very successful in different parts of them. Obviously, Michigan didn't go well. Nebraska didn't go well for Frost, but outside of that, we got Arizona, we got West Virginia, we got Jack State. Like, there's just a lot for Rich Rod. So how successful do I think he will be this year? I think it would be a big accomplishment with just that much roster churn and turnover to get to a bowl game this year. I would think that should probably be the goal. And I know that like West Virginia fans are very frustrated with this idea of like, hey, like we ran off Neil Brown for basically being the just get us to a bowl game kind of a guy, hover around 500 kind of a guy. But it's it's a lot different. With Rich Rod, I think you feel like you're building to something more dynamic. I think he has more upside. I think he is a more dynamic potential head coach there. But I would think West Virginia's probably between 5 and 7 wins this year. It's just really hard to know, though, because there's so many new players on that roster. There's so much turnover. It's a bit of a fool's errand, I think, to try and predict it, to be completely honest. But I hope that answers your question. And I was going to see. Oh, okay. Okay. Thank you, Caleb. Caleb says you would say donate for a message at the top or something. I would donate and say this is a message at the top. Okay. All right. Thank you, Caleb. Appreciate that. Just want to make sure I wasn't missing anything that you, anything else that you had for me there. But yeah, those are my thoughts on West Virginia, Caleb. I genuinely appreciate your support and for reaching out and asking. I'm intrigued by Rich Rod long term. I will say I'm warming up a little bit more to the idea of how that could work out long term at West Virginia than I was at first. And honestly, some of it was the fact that 2 Big 12 teams had done this, and the Scott Frost one really kind of, I was just like, man, I don't know about that. And it's like almost by association, the fact that you had 2 of these kind of trying the same thing, it like almost made me view it worse when it first happened. I'm coming around a little bit on the idea of Rich Rod there. Payson Cougar fan. What's up, Payson Cougar fan? Sorry, John, Utah still sucks. Hey, all right. Payson Cougar fan said it, not me. I did have some fun. There was a Utah fan not happy with me on, I think he was not happy with what I had been saying on here, but he tweeted at me and I had to tell him, like, hey man, what do you want me to do? I'm a Hall of Fame BYU tight end. Why would I like Utah? Hall of Fame BYU tight end here, people. Just check my Twitter profile picture. Michael, what's up, Michael? Plus a BYU in the Big 12 is we're happy to be here. That is very true. That is a little bit different. Oh, and Michael getting in on it too. Payson Cougar fan also says, or Michael and Payson Cougar fan say Utah still sucks. Utah, so it's not me. Okay, this is not me. These people sent me these lovely messages with their financial support. I am just reading it and relaying it. So don't shoot the messenger. But I appreciate you for being here, Michael. It's good to see you. And good to hear from you, my friend. Okay. So the Big 12, I'm painting the positive picture here, right? The positive picture is the Big 12 is landing 5-star quarterbacks and landing a lot of talent. In the case of Texas Tech, it's all over the board, particularly defensive linemen. Big 12 is doing a lot of work in high-profile spots to bring in big-time talent. But how far does the Big 12 have to go overall from a talent acquisition standpoint to get anywhere within shouting distance of the Big 10 and the SEC? Unfortunately, the answer is a very long way. But I will say there's a silver lining to that. I'll put it that way, a silver lining to that. And really, the biggest problem that the Big 12 has right now is the NFL draft numbers, which are inherently like this is where, I mean, you're basically just getting killed by conference realignment twice over because obviously, I mean, you don't have Texas and Oklahoma anymore, like the first part, the obvious part. But then beyond that, the NFL draft numbers get so skewed. Like you've got 18 Big 10 teams. Now you've got 16 SEC teams, the 2 highest, teams that are churning out the most NFL draft talent every year from the Big 12 just got plucked away to the SEC. So you're losing those numbers. The SEC is gaining those numbers. It's just like this is where realignment is just, it's hitting you twice. It's getting you multiple times. And so it makes these draft numbers look horrible. I mean, this is from this past year, 2025 draft. SEC, 79 players taken. Big 10, 71. ACC, 42. Big 12, 31. So the difference between the SEC, 79 picks, the Big 12 has 31. That's 48 picks difference. So, I mean, if that doesn't change, you're going to continue to have real reputational hits here. If that gap widens, if that gap stays about the same, you think about it, that was a year in which the Big 12 did have 2 of the top 10 overall picks between Tetero McMillan and Travis Hunter. So there was even an extra little bit of juice this year in the Big 12 draft. But the positive is Houston and BYU, 2 teams that I talked about earlier in the show, just landed 5-star quarterbacks in this class, teams that are stepping up their talent evaluation game. They did not have a single player drafted combined between them this year. So we're seeing now these schools that they have not been the ones churning out the talent. Now they're going out making a concerted effort to get said talent to start churning it out. So I think it's a good thing that you're seeing schools that, didn't even have someone drafted. We're not on the high end of the talent sphere in the Big 12. They're going out and landing those type of players right now. Texas Tech had that number one portal class. They only had 2 players drafted this past year. That was tied for 6th in the conference. So that's why we're here talking about this. These schools that were not high up on that talent list, they're now starting to procure some real players. Like Tech, only 2 players drafted last year. I bet Texas Tech will have more players that get drafted from that defensive line transfer class than they had drafted all of last season total, right? I mean, that's the level of player, the caliber of player that they were pulling in there, and there were 4 or 5 of them in the portal. So, and frankly, I'm about to break down here in more detail, like where Big 12 recruiting is at from a granular level in high school recruiting. But the portal, to me, I feel like that's almost a better way to be judging an actual roster's talent level these days. I know that's probably a little bit unfair because the Big 12 has so many developmental programs, and that is still going to be real lifeblood. But man, the crazy competition to me seems to be in the portal. It can make so much more of a drastic difference, it would appear, by getting ready-made talent. And schools are sending so much more of their resources toward that as opposed to high school recruiting now. So we're going to do both. Okay. But if you want, these are harsh. All right. Like Big 12 fans, sometimes you got to hear things you don't like. These numbers are not going to sound great. High school recruiting in the 2025 class. So that is not Ryder Lyons. That is not Keyshawn Henderson. That is last year. Okay. 2025 class. The Big 12 did not have a single team in the top 25 of the final on-3 consensus recruiting rankings. TCU was number 1 at number 26. They had 6 4-star players. There was not a single consensus 5-star player in the Big 12. Now, as I mentioned, like Lincoln Cure at K-State, he was a 5-star according to at least one recruiting service, but he was not a consensus 5-star there. Colorado was the 35th best class. K-State was 37, Baylor 39, Oklahoma State top 40. Those are your only classes in the top 40 in terms of high school talent in 2025. Frankly, we're talking about 5-star recruits here, but it's not looking a whole lot better, at least as of right now. Very early. There's a lot to sort out still, but Kansas is the closest to the top 25 right now at number 27 in the 2026 class. They are number 27. Texas Tech is at 35, and that's it in the top 40. So it's a lot to come, a lot to play out, a lot to happen. But even with these acquisitions, this is the point. Like, there is still a ways to go. Now, Kansas is another school that probably deserves some mention here because they have stepped their recruiting game up a bit this year by, in large part, devoting more financial resources to it. A place that obviously historically has been so tied to the blue blood basketball program that they have. They're now recognizing, hey, football is something we need to really go all in on, and they are spending more. They are spending like it. They are doing a better job there. If you want total 5-star players, this maybe seems a little bit better. I mentioned no 5-star players, 0 in the 25 class. 2026, the Big 12 does have a couple. We have talked about them all night so far. So there's 2. The SEC has 8 right now for reference. SEC has 8 5-star players. Pretty in line with, like, if we're going to extrapolate out those draft numbers, the 79 to 31 draft numbers, it's pretty in line with about what you would expect. But at least getting a couple, and you've got them both at really high-profile positions at quarterback. Transfer portal is much more encouraging, okay? I do really believe, like, the portal, to me, it seems to be more of the lifeblood of college football these days. It also is one, if you want to accuse me of Big 12 homer looks way better for the Big, whatever. I still read the high school stuff first. But if you're looking at top 25 Big 12 portal recruiting classes, there are 5. There were 0 high school top 25 Big 12 recruiting classes last year. Tech, number 1 or 2, as I said, depending on where you look. Baylor's at 18. K-State is at 20. Colorado's at 23. And then we've got Oklahoma State 29, Arizona State 36, UCF 40, if you're looking at schools that are in the top 40. So those numbers sound a lot better. They're going to be more ready to compete immediately. So it speaks more to what the Big 12 would be like this year as opposed to years down the road. So how helpful is all this data? One question that I think is fair to ask here is how helpful is all this data when the recruiting landscape maybe about to shift dramatically again because of the House settlement? Probably a fair question. We still don't know how all of this will break down. Again, something that many of you, I'm sure, are sick of hearing me talk about on the show. We don't know how well they're going to be able to enforce things. And will this take Texas Tech's spending spree mentality and attitude totally out of it? It could. If you ask many Big 12 athletic directors, they're certainly pushing that message that it will. But if you ask most anybody else in college athletics, there seems to be a lot of pessimism that it actually would do that. So we shall see. But it underscores the big point here, which is that, hey, great for the Big 12 to have some of these wins, but everybody needs to continue doing this. It's got to keep pushing forward because there still is a very wide talent gap. It's not everything. Being a developmental program, you can churn out great college players that were 3-star, 3-star recruits, whatever it might be. You can definitely do that, but over the long haul, talent is going to win out. I will say the silver lining here is that where we're seeing the Big 12 start to step up is at really important positions. Obviously, quarterback above all else, and that's the two guys that we've been talking about here in the 26 class. 2 5-star quarterbacks. You'd want to see that more than anything if you're going to pick out a couple 5-stars for the Big 12 to have nailed down. But even beyond that, like Texas Tech, and this was in Shahan Jayaraj's story today that I again will highly encourage everybody to go read. From CBS Sports, great read on what's going on at Texas Tech in depth. He said he had been working on it for months. He had been in Lubbock there. But there was talk about how James Blanchard, the GM there, he had identified like, hey, let's go get defensive linemen. Like this is what we need, defensive linemen. If we're going to win big, we got to be really good up in the trenches. And so he kind of seemed to identify it as almost a market inefficiency. Well, there's a lot of money being thrown around for, big defensive linemen. Don't get me wrong. But maybe not as much as teams that get focused on like receivers, obviously quarterbacks. And Tech felt good about its quarterback in Baron Morton, so they could go out and spend more on defensive line. Great high-profile way to spend money. Those are big-time players that can really help. If it's not going to be quarterback, you can argue for edge, pass rushers, as much as anything, as being next most important. So while the Big 12 is still trailing the overall talent game here by quite a bit, if you're going to start making up the gap, make it up at the most high-profile positions. No offense to a center or an offensive guard, but if it's going to be a 5-star center or a 5-star offensive guard, probably not going to be as impactful to the overall roster. So yeah, look, Big 12 will always be playing from behind on a sheer talent level to the SEC and then the top probably third of the Big 10. But you can certainly be as competitive as anybody else out there. Just got to go prove it. Just got to go do it. Still 11 draft picks behind the ACC, for instance, right now. But hopefully that gives you a little bit more overall picture of where the Big 12 is at recruiting-wise with the big boys. All right, let's check in with Caleb. Caleb, thank you, Caleb. Appreciate it. Very, very generous, my friend. Caleb says the problem with the SEC and other conferences is there is zero depth. Well, the Big Ten definitely has a depth problem. The Big Ten is very top-heavy, and that's why I mentioned there, like, hey, Big 12 needs to be thinking about, like, we've got to compete and be just as good as the bottom 2/3 of the Big Ten from a talent standpoint. Virtually all of the ACC, maybe not Clemson, Miami, Florida State. The rest of the ACC, certainly. And then the SEC, I don't know. It's really kind of like the bottom third. I will give the SEC this. I think the SEC does have pretty good depth. It might be it's overrated depth. I still think it is good. The SEC wants you to think that it is, just an out of this world, immeasurable amount of incredible depth. And I think that's where everybody gets frustrated and wants to run and be like, well, it's Big 12 or the SEC isn't deep. What is this? No, I mean, the SEC is pretty deep, but it's just not like overwhelmingly deep where nobody could ever dream of competing there like the SEC wants you to think. And then the Big Ten, I mean, the Big Ten's been coasting on that Stars and Jags thing forever, where it's like a couple of behemoth monster programs at the top and then a lot of blah outside of that, which is what, of all the realignment things that are very frustrating. That to me is about the most frustrating part of all of it, is that you have all these schools, I won't even name names, that just won the geographic birth lottery and are no better, in fact, worse in terms of competitiveness, resources, their football programs than teams in the Big 12, but they are totally safe just because they happen to be located in an area where they were in the Big 10 100 years ago. So, anyway. But appreciate you, Caleb. Follow up with this one. Caleb says, I was also told that a lot of recruits lose stars when they go to other conferences. I don't know how much truth there is to that. I know that people got really locked onto that. BYU fans may have to help me out. I feel like there was another BYU recruit that got everybody worked up about this within the last year. I don't mean to say that like flippantly or dismissively. I have just grown used to that. Like as a K-State fan, man, K-State fans have been talking about that for a long time, for years, that, it feels like sometimes you get a kid to commit and the recruiting profile sort of drops, as opposed to the other way around. Sometimes if you're chasing a kid and then he goes to the big dog, then he gets an extra little bump, an extra little kiss in the recruiting rankings, which, yeah, some of that I think is going to be natural. And I know people will then point to, okay, well, self-fulfilling prophecy. Everybody says the SEC is the most talented. Well, if the recruiting services are just propping up their players, then of course it's going to look like that. They'll have the best recruiting classes. And yeah, again, I do think there is some of that happening, but the ultimate proof in the pudding is, who is the NFL drafting? And the drafted players thing, you're still so far behind. And that is what will have to change. Like, the proof is in the pudding. The NFL is not going to waste time fluffing up the SEC's resume just by drafting players that aren't good. So you got to compete better with how many players you're actually sending on to the NFL. Michael, man, Utah's taking a beating here. Utah fans, you got to get back in here, man. Michael says, and Utah still sucks. Say it again. That's 3 times today. So Utah fans, you gotta get back in here, man. Find me with the super chats, Utah fans. If you want to get Michael back. Michael said it, not me. Michael said it, not me. May have sounded like me. It was Michael, I promise you. Caleb, what was the SEC's record in bowl games the past few seasons? Not good. Yeah, I don't have it offhand. Well, SEC bowl record 2024. I think the SEC was 8-7 in bowl games. I'm just laughing at the notable wins. Florida in the Gasparilla Bowl, Vanderbilt in the Birmingham Bowl. The most toughest thing for the SEC was just their playoff performance this year, obviously. Georgia, disappointing. Texas should have been beaten by Arizona State. That, I think, probably carries a little more weight than it definitely carries more weight than the bowl game record. Bowl games are so tough to measure these days. But what I can tell you, Caleb, is that the SEC was unabashedly undefeated in hypothetical matchups this bowl season and of course this playoff season. So, Alabama and Ole Miss and South Carolina, for that matter, they were each about 150-0 in hypothetical games in the month of November and December this past year. So we definitely got to see that. Oh boy. I mean, like the Roll Tide Roll. Can we just get a little bit more varied than this? Like Mississippi. I mean, if you put the top Big 12 team in the SEC, you'll be Vandy, Mississippi State. Hey, Roll Tide Roll. Hey guys, can you help me out with something here? Roll Tide Roll. He says, if you put the top Big 12 team in the SEC, they would be Vandy. Well, Roll Tide Roll, that's really interesting because that means that the top team in the Big 12 would beat Alabama's ass, because that's what happened this past season, is that Vandy beat Alabama's ass. So I will take that as a compliment for the Big 12, that Roll Tide Roll has confirmed that Arizona State last year would have beaten Alabama and led wire to wire. Alabama would never have had a lead on Arizona State in a game last year, because when Alabama played Vandy, Alabama did not lead the entirety of the game. So that's some really good confirmation that we just got there from SEC country itself. From SEC country itself, we got the confirmation, guys, that the Big 12 champion would be able to take out Alabama quite easily, never trail in the game. So that's very good. Thank you, Roll Tide Roll. Thank you for being here. Uh-oh. Hall of Fame college football is sniping back. Seriously, bowl games, when you bring up Georgia beating the it's a bad word. I can't say that. I got you, Hall of Fame college football. I got you. They mean nothing, but someone beats SC in the Pop-Tart Bowl, it matters. Who's SC in the Pop-Tart Bowl? Like NC State? Are we talking about K-State, NC State? Anyway, or is it just a generalization there? I don't think South Carolina's played in the Pop-Tart Bowl. Well, I think there's a lot here. If I were to bring up a Georgia example, Hall of Fame college football, I'd go with Georgia gobsmacking TCU in the national championship game over Florida State. The Florida State example, like, quarterback was injured. The life had been totally sucked out of them by the playoff committee. Yeah, that looked really bad. I think there are a lot of extenuating circumstances that got it there. I would not use bowl games as a serious barometer to like really throw anything up against the SEC, but it is very funny to see the flailing from SEC country afterward that immediately it just, it is fun to use the meme of like, what is Parker Fleming? Oh, the SEC could have won blank game. They just didn't want to be there. We get a lot of that. Really, my thing, Hall of Fame college football, would just be this past year. It was proven on the field. The SEC did not deserve extra special treatment. They still got special treatment because 3 lost teams from any other conference would not have gotten the consideration for that final at-large spot that 3 teams from the SEC did, which is a nod to the strength of the conference. It's just SEC country wanted like 2 times that in terms of the nod, and that was not accurate. So yeah, I know that I get branded as like an SEC total hater here. I mean, I feel like I'm just a realist, and the pushback comes so strong this past year because this past year, again, that was the reality. The SEC over the past 20 years, 2 decades, has undeniably been the best conference in college football. It is undeniably the deepest conference in college football. It deserves recognition as being the best. Has it gotten some help along the way from an extra propaganda push from ESPN? Yes, I think a little bit, but that doesn't diminish that it hasn't been the best conference overall and has deserved a lot of attention. Is it really tough on a week-in, week-out basis to play SEC road games? For sure. But did the SEC deserve like 4 or 5 playoff spots this past year? No, absolutely not. And the SEC's performance in the playoff bears that out. Arizona State, Big 12 champion, who again, Roll Tide Roll, already established here, would have beaten Alabama during the regular season and never trailed. Arizona State then was 4th and 13 stop away from beating Texas, the SEC runner-up, in the Peach Bowl. And that was an SEC team, by the way, that an SEC runner-up that lost the SEC championship game in overtime. So, I mean, they were that close to being the SEC champs. So that's the distinction here. That's the distinction. And see, Hall of Fame college football hater, this is the problem. You said that I was generalizing. You're the one that is overly generalizing. Like generalizing in very basic talking points here are any of those teams that have beaten SMU, Indiana, Boise. It's just, can you get a new line? Like, I know that's the same. This is exactly what we talked about, these hundreds of hypothetical games. What if you lined Alabama up against Vandy? How would that go? What if you lined Alabama up against Oklahoma last year? How would that go? What if you lined, Ole Miss up against Kentucky? How would that have gone? It would have gone poorly because they lost those games against very bad teams. We're just going to be arguing around in the same circles that everybody did for all of November there. And I've got to get to the hottest Big 12 takes that you guys have. Okay. If you have a hot Big 12 take, it is not too late to get it in there. Click the $ below the chat box if you want to submit a super chat with your hot take for the Big 12 this year. I solicited those on Twitter. I have 4 that I'm going to read to you here. And man, these are all over the board. And there is one great one here about Big 12 coaches on the hot seat. and you may be scratching your head going, Big 12, is there a hot seat for Big 12 coaches? Well, it's a part of what we're going to get into here. Well, let's start with this one. I believe the handle on this one is Deep Pow Chasin. Here it is. Deep Pow Chasin. Pokes will have an offense that puts up points like it did in the Holgerson-Monken days. Now, to me, that is pretty damn bold. I think we're starting out with one here that is quite bold because Oklahoma State, boy, that offense last year was rough. Now, I know Alan Bowman is not walking through that door again. And usually when you say that, it means, I'd be saying like, well, Brandon Whedon ain't walking through that door. Well, Alan Bowman ain't walking through that door either. And that part is a good thing. No offense to Alan Bowman. He was a very nice guy. I enjoyed talking to him last year at Big 12 Media Days. But Oklahoma State last year was 13th in the conference. They scored 22 points per game in Big 12 games. Not very good. That was with a Doak Walker Award winner at running back as well in Ollie Gordon. So that offense was not very good. Now, if you want to tell me that Hosseini is going to be an elite quarterback this year, okay. I always blank on the other kid. It's not Rangel, Zane Flores. If you want to tell me that Flores is going to be an elite quarterback this year, okay. I have my doubts. I think there's good reason to have doubt about that, but nobody really saw Sam Leavitt coming as an elite quarterback last year. So, hey, maybe it could happen, but I still think that's why this becomes a bold prediction. Doug Meacham as offensive coordinator, it's not the most inspiring thing in the world to me. I will be honest. Now, look, you got to give Mike Gundy some respect. Mike Gundy has been an excellent coach, and many times when left for dead, he churns out something that is much better than you would anticipate. But Doug Meacham, the last time that he was an offensive coordinator, it was in the Big 12, and it was for a TCU team that was 7th in the 10-team Big 12 in scoring offense in 2021. Before that, he was offensive coordinator at Kansas, and I think that was the David Beatty era, right? So, I don't know. I'm not feeling great about that. I don't get great, warm, fuzzy feelings, but that's why this is bold. So, P-Pan, you understood the assignment. That is a bold, hot take. That is a hot take. From the Big 12. So well done. Well done with that. I guess maybe that should have been my lead. You understood the assignment. Let's get to this one from a West Virginia fan. It says, I'll be the West Virginia homer. Mountaineers to the Big 12 championship. That is from Greg. Greg is predicting a West Virginia Big 12 championship. Now, here's the thing. Obviously, on its face, that is a very bold prediction. West Virginia is going to be picked probably in the bottom 5 of the conference. West Virginia has overturned 2/3 to 3/4 of the roster. It's a brand new coaching staff. It's been a long time since Rich Rod has been a head coach at the Power 4 level. And the last time that he was, it was a much different, NIL, transfer portal, totally different environment. There's a lot that needs to get worked out in Morgantown for this to happen. However, and so I will still say, definitely a hot take. However, not as hot as you might think, because if you look at the Big 12 standings last year, the team that was picked last, Arizona State, obviously won the league. And if we were doing this on June 25th, 2024, and somebody came in with their hottest take being that Arizona State would win the Big 12 championship, I would have thought it sounded more ridiculous June 25th, 24 than this does June 25th, 25. So with that context in mind, it is not quite as hot as you might think. But I have a hard time seeing the path. If there's a Cam Scattaboo, though, on this West Virginia roster, that would be a nice start. So does West Virginia have someone that could totally carry the load like that? We'll see. I think that's a little bit doubtful, but hey, I get it. Hey, Jaheim White, great running back, man. Great running back. Is he Cam Scattaboo? I don't know. Greg, you understood the assignment. That is a good hot take. Am I down to the last one already? Oh, we've got Coal Country WVU. That's what it is. My apologies here. It's Coal Country WVU. Here we go. This is an interesting one. Not about West Virginia. Houston finishes with a better overall record than Iowa State. Houston finishes with a better overall record than Iowa State. How about that? Not quite as spicy, I think, as the other ones that we have here. If you are looking at Big 12 projected win totals for next year, you've got 7.5 projected wins for Iowa State, and you've got 5.5 projected wins for Houston. So it's only a 2-game difference. Whereas, we're talking about like West Virginia, if they're picked like 13th, say in the Big 12 this year, or 12th, I feel like the expectation for that would be like 4-8, 5-7. Iowa State won 11 games last year. They're a 4-8, 5-7 team, probably winning at least 10 games. You're talking about like a 5-game difference there if you're picking West Virginia to win the league. Here, you're only talking about, at least in terms of preseason projections, like a 3-game difference to make up. Less hot of a take. You must be a big Connor Wegman believer if you're going to do this. It will certainly take Connor Wegman being awesome. Remember, Houston is also breaking in 2 different coordinators this year. Sheil Wood is off at Texas Tech now. Probably neutralized a bit by, Willie Fritz. I think knows defense very, very well. But this is like warm. It's warm. I think Iowa State will still be very good. Ceiling may not be quite as high because they lost the receivers that they had last year. But they will still be a very good team that should be, I think, in contention for a Big 12 championship. To me, they're kind of a tier 2, like borderline tier 1. We're straddling the line of tier 1, tier 2. Big 12 championship contender this year. So to me, it's like Houston's a year or 2 away probably from that. But that's a fun one and a fun one to explore. Coal Country podcast. I think the way it happens is that Connor Wegman is totally rejuvenated and is a stud with Houston. Houston continues to play very good defense because it's Willie Fritz. And then Iowa State, the offense tanks because they lost 2 incredible, incredible college receivers that are now both playing for the Houston Texans. Finally, this one I felt like was the most interesting. And honestly, of all these that we've seen, this might be the hottest. Raider Red Sun. What's up, Raider Red Sun? Raider Red Sun says 3 Big 12 head coaches get fired, 2 before the end of the season. And that's the hot part of this, is that 2 get fired before the end of the season. Man. Okay, so I started going through this. I was like, well, who would you consider like kind of on the hot seat right now in the Big 12? I mean, Brent Brennan to me would be the most likely fireable candidate, which may seem a little crazy because he's only in year 2. But man, last year was that bad during a season with real expectations. And there was already, I mean, if you pay attention to, the Arizona media crew out there, I think, guys like Jason Shear do a really good job. It sounded like there was already some chatter about that last year. Like, was that so bad that with Fafita and McMillan to tank the way that they did, miss a bowl game, not look very competitive in a lot of these losses? If there was already talk about it last year, then you could see the wheels really falling off. And if the wheels really fall off this year, then that's one I could see because of that chatter last year. Maybe that does happen in season. Like, that's one guy maybe could get fired in season. I still would kind of doubt that, but maybe. I'm looking at their schedule this year and how bad it could get off to from a start. So they've got Hawaii and Weber State at home to start the year. I don't know. I'd be very surprised if he lost. I mean, Weber State can be a pretty good FCS program. Then K-State at home on a Friday. They've got to go to Iowa State. They've got Oklahoma State at home, BYU at Houston, at Colorado. I mean, you could definitely see the case here where Big 12 play starts like 1-5 or something. You get to the end of the year. I don't know. There's not a single game there, I guess, that I would look at and say, well, yeah, I mean, they should win that. I mean, I get, Oklahoma State at home, maybe. See what Cincinnati is by the end of the year. But yeah, you could see that getting really rocky and having a disastrous season, and maybe he gets fired. But anybody else, like during the season, Scott Satterfield, Scott Satterfield's another guy that probably has to, I mean, at the very least, get to a bowl game. But I just don't know if is Satterfield on shaky enough ground that like he would get fired mid-season. They start with Nebraska, but then Bowling Green, Northwestern State. They're at Kansas, Iowa State, UCF, at Oklahoma State. Yeah, I don't know. I don't see this falling apart so much at the beginning of the year that we get to a point where Scott Satterfield's getting fired. And then, I don't know. I mean, Dave Aranda was like about ready to be run out of town and then rallied at the end of last year and put together a nice offseason here that has expectations fairly high. Maybe there's a chance if Dave Aranda really does struggle this year that he would be somebody that gets fired. I guess that's another one I would put in there. If it turns right back into a pumpkin, it's a sub 500 year. I could definitely see that. But I don't know about Baylor doing that within the season. And Mike Gundy is like the only guy that I would think of, like some Oklahoma State fans probably consider him to be a bit of a, like they're a little tired of it. And if he struggles again, they would want him gone. But Gundy, you can't fire Gundy. Like you're certainly not firing him mid-season. Like that's not happening to a guy who's, the legendary coach that he is at that school. So I don't know. I don't think there's anybody else I'm missing in terms of someone that seems like they're like really on the hot seat going into the season. So I guess I'll put it that way. I think it's a scorching hot take, a scorching hot take to say that would happen. 3 Big 12 coaches fired and 2 fired mid-season. But Raider Red Sun, that's why I said hot take. You understood the assignment. Thank you for that. Guys, go reply to the tweet if you want to on Twitter at JL Kurtz to give me your hottest Big 12 takes. I would love to keep taking some of those, and I definitely still have some to get through, so we'll keep doing that throughout the summer. Caleb asks what my Big 12 rankings are this year. I've been, Caleb, kind of just going with tiers. So to me, I've got like Arizona State, Baylor. I am very high on Baylor. Speaking of the Bears, Arizona State, Baylor, K-State, like tier 1, Iowa State, top of tier 2, along with, it's tough to know what to do with BYU. Like Iowa State, TCU, Texas Tech, tier 2, Utah, probably tier 2. BYU, I'm just kind of pulling right now from the discussion because I don't know what's happening exactly with Jake Retzloff. And to me, that makes a really big difference with them. Kansas is probably close to tier 2. They're like hovering right on the borderline of being a tier 2 team for me. Then we're getting into like, your next tier is Colorado, Houston, Oklahoma State. And really, if I were projecting the bottom of the Big 12, UCF and Arizona to me would be the bottom 2 in the league. So I think that's about the best quick synopsis I could give you of where I am, where I'm feeling about all that right now. So anyway, okay. Well, thank you. Thank you, everybody. Lively chat. Even the SEC fans, you make it a lot more fun when you're in here. You make it lively. I appreciate that. I definitely do appreciate that. Roll Tide Roll seem to be a good sport. So I appreciate that. Please do like the video on your way out. Subscribe to the channel. Sign up for the Open for Business Big 12 newsletter. You can click the link in the description of the video or just go to ofbnews.com. That is ofbnews.com in order to do that. Appreciate all of you. Thank you for being here. John-Kurtz-4 on Venmo. If you're not watching live and you want to send me a question or comment, then I'll kick off the next show with it. Thank you all. Enjoy the rest of your week, and I will talk to you all very soon. Take care.